The next thing that we're going to do is move along to removing all of our lug nuts and then the wheel. Now that the wheel's out of the way, let's go ahead and remove our axle bolt right here. Take a punch and a hammer, come right inside where the axle is and break it free from the bearing. Looking from the back side of the knuckle, the next thing that we're going to do is remove the ball joint nut. Commonly, it's going to have a neoprene lock on it, so if you carefully heat it up to melt that neoprene lock, you can easily remove the nut. Remove that nut. Let's go ahead and take our hammer and a pickle fork and we're going to separate the ball joint from the knuckle. There we are. Now let's take that ball joint nut. We're just going to start it a couple threads onto that stud just for safety. Now let's move along to removing the rest of our mounting bolts. Let's start by removing the front bolt. If you want to, you can remove all of your plastics to get it out of the way, or you could just carefully bend it out of the way and then remove the bolt. Let's move along to the rearward bolts that hold the control arm to the subframe of the car. Let's go ahead and take a nice pry bar and we're going to carefully pry in between the control arm and the subframe. When we do this, it's going to try pulling everything this way. So you want to, of course, make sure that you have plenty of movement from your axle to make sure you don't damage it in any way. Remove your ball joint nut. Remove the control arm. There it is, friends. The next thing we're going to do is pay attention to all of our mounting bolts. You want to make sure that they're nice and clean, free of any debris, and of course, make sure that they're in good condition. Once we clean them up, inspect them. If it looks like they need to be replaced, you need to go ahead and replace them. So we cleaned up our bolts. I used some red thread locker on the threads, and then I used some copper never sees on the smooth shanked areas. Now it's time to install our brand new control arm. Let's start on the rear. We'll get this lined up, we'll slide in the front, and then we'll do the ball joint. Just make sure they're started. Let's do the front bolt. Now it's time for the ball joint nut. Pay attention, it has two sides. It has one that has the blue neoprene on there, which is the locker. That needs to be facing up towards the axle. And then of course it has the other side. Now with all of our mounting hardware started, the next thing that we're going to do is tighten up our ball joint nut. What you're probably going to notice when you try to tighten it is that the stud is going to spin inside of the knuckle. To help prevent that, I'm just going to carefully put something underneath the control arm to apply gentle pressure inside of the knuckle area here to prevent that stud from spinning. Okay, now I have this bottomed out. We're going to want to torque this to 52 foot-pounds, but as you can tell, the axle's kind of in the way to be able to do that. So what I'm going to do is just try to make it as snug as possible. And then I'll give it a couple loving bonks with my rubber mallet along the wrench here, just to help make sure it's set. With pressure still underneath the control arm, let's go ahead and snug up this front bolt right here. Torque this to 129 foot-pounds. Remove your jack. Moving to the rear of the control arm, go ahead and snug these up and then torque them to 89 foot-pounds. Now let's get our axle bolt in there. It's recommended to make sure that you use a brand new bolt, and I like to use a little bit of red thread locker. Let's bottom this out, then we'll torque it to 26 foot-pounds, and then we'll turn it an additional 90 degrees. To be able to torque this, you're going to notice that this is going to want to spin. I just use a pry bar coming straight across the studs down to the ground to prevent it from spinning. Now for the additional 90 degrees, I'm going to start with my ratchet straight up and down, and I'm going to bring it so it's at approximately 3 o'clock. Remove your lug nut. Now we can get the wheel back up on here. We'll snug it up, get the wheel back on the ground, and then we'll torque it to manufacturer's specifications. With the wheel on the ground, let's torque these to 81 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friends, that job's in the books. What's left to do now? Take it for a road test down to your local alignment shop.